The universe hummed with the constant flow of life. From distant star systems to urban sprawls across planets, everything moved to the rhythm of progress. Yet, in this vastness, few individuals could claim the title of truly powerful, of being the ones who shaped the course of events. Among them was one alien, Vornak Jator, a being whose wealth and influence reached across galaxies. His name was whispered in corridors of power, and his reputation as a ruthless businessman was legendary. But there was a project that, even with all his resources and intelligence, Vornak could not fully predict. The creation of an heir, a hybrid child, part alien, part human. Vornak's race, the Jatorians, were ancient and advanced. They had mastered technologies that surpassed the wildest imaginations of most species. Yet, even they had one limitation: their inability to evolve in ways that matched the vast diversity of the universe. They were stagnating. That's where humans, with their adaptability, came in. Vornak believed that by integrating human genetics into his own, he could create a being that would possess the best traits of both races, a creature capable of solving the problems his species could not. But to accomplish this, he needed a human woman. Not just any woman, but one with strong genetic potential, someone who could bear a child with the promise of greatness. The woman he chose was Ayana. She was no queen, no heiress, and certainly no scientist. Ayana was an ordinary human, born and raised in a tight-knit community that valued resilience and strength above all. She was black, with the rich, deep skin of her ancestors, her eyes gleaming with an unspoken wisdom. Her heritage was not just a part of her, it was the foundation of everything she stood for. Her life, before the fateful meeting with Vornak, had been one of struggle but also of growth. She worked multiple jobs to support herself, her family, and her dreams. Yet despite her struggles, she never lost sight of her roots. She held on to her culture, the vibrant traditions of her people, the music, the stories, the art. And it was that strength, that inner fire, that drew Vornak's attention. The contract was simple. She would carry the child, and in return, she would be compensated handsomely, more money than she could ever dream of, more than enough to set up a future for her family and herself. The child, however, was to remain a secret, a private matter between her and Vornak. She would give birth, and the child would be taken, raised, and trained by him. Ayana was reluctant at first, hesitant about the deal. She knew little about the alien, except for the rumors and stories that circulated in the shadowed corners of space stations. But her family's situation, her mother's medical bills, her younger brother's tuition, made it impossible to refuse. The offer seemed too good to pass up. "I don't like it, Ayana," her best friend Kira had warned her one evening when she shared the news. "I don't trust him. No one's ever done something like this for good reasons." Ayana had smiled at Kira's concern, but wasn't swayed. "It's just business," she replied, the weight of her decision settling on her shoulders. "I'm doing this for us." For the future. The words were easier to say than the fear she felt deep inside. What kind of future would this child have? What kind of world was she bringing it into? Vornak's promises of wealth, of power, seemed hollow when she thought about the child's life, growing up under the scrutiny of an alien empire. But Ayana had little choice. She signed the contract. Vornak had assured her that the process would be simple, painless, and over before she knew it. She would return to her life afterward, with all the riches she could ever need. But deep down, Ayana felt an unease. Something about the way Vornak spoke, so confident, so sure of his own plans, left her with a sinking feeling that this was not just a business deal. She was a means to an end, a stepping stone in a grander scheme. But the deal had been made, and now Ayana's fate, and the fate of her unborn child, was tied to the alien who held the strings of the universe in his hands. Ayana sat in the sterile white room, the soft hum of machines echoing around her. It was a far cry from the warmth of her home, the neighborhood buzzing with the rhythm of life. Here everything felt too quiet, too controlled, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Across from her, Vornak Jator sat in an elegant chair, his presence commanding yet detached. His dark, elongated eyes glowed faintly, and his skin shimmered in the soft light like liquid metal. He was alien in every sense of the word, yet despite his intimidating appearance, there was something strangely familiar about him. A sharp intellect that demanded respect, but with it, a cool, calculated detachment from human emotions. "Miss Ayana," he began, his voice low and smooth, "I trust your journey was comfortable." Ayana nodded stiffly, though her mind raced with unease. She had seen the grand ships, the towering structures of his alien world. Everything about this place screamed power, and the alien's wealth was evident in every corner of the pristine room. Yet, in the back of her mind, doubt lingered like a shadow. What was she truly walking into? "Yes," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart hammered in her chest. "It's a little overwhelming, but I'm fine." Vornak's lips twitched into what could almost be called a smile, but it never quite reached his eyes. "Good. I know this is a big decision for you, and I respect that." His gaze locked with hers. "But rest assured, this will be a partnership, mutually beneficial." He gestured toward a sleek console beside him, and a holographic display flickered to life. Images of alien landscapes, planets in distant systems, and intricate genetic sequences floated in midair, flashing by so quickly Ayana could hardly process them. It was clear this was no ordinary arrangement. "I've studied human genetics extensively," Vornak continued, "and I have found your species to be fascinating. Your adaptability, your resilience. It's something we Jatorians lack. We've become stagnant, incapable of evolving further. But you, your people, hold the key to what we need. Together, we can create something beyond both of us." Ayana felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard rumors about his intentions, whispers of a hybrid experiment, but hearing him speak so openly about it was unsettling. His words sounded so clinical, as if she were nothing more than a vessel for his grand scheme. "Why me?" Ayana asked, her voice betraying her wariness. "Why not someone else?" Vornak's eyes softened slightly, but only for a moment. "You are unique, Ayana. Your genetic potential is exceptional. Your resilience, your spirit, they are qualities I believe will contribute greatly to our project." She studied him, trying to read the man or the alien who sat before her. Despite the praise, there was something about his demeanor that felt cold, as if she were just another piece in a complex puzzle he was trying to solve. Her stomach tightened, but she held his gaze. "Is this truly what you want?" she asked, more to herself than to him. "For me to carry your child, to bring something into the world that I don't even understand?" Vornak didn't flinch. "Yes, the child will be special, beyond anything your people have ever known, and when the child grows, they will be raised in an environment of great opportunity, to thrive in a way no human could alone." He leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "Think of the possibilities, Ayana. Think of the legacy." The idea of a legacy felt distant to her. She wasn't thinking about creating something for an empire or some distant future. She was thinking about the here and now, the child, her role as a mother, the responsibility that would fall on her shoulders. Would this child be a tool to Vornak, or would it have a life of its own? "I'm not sure what you're asking of me," she said quietly, her uncertainty creeping into her voice. Vornak's expression remained unchanged, but there was a slight tilt of his head that indicated he was assessing her. "I am asking you to trust me. I am offering you a future, a chance for greatness. The child will not be raised in isolation, but among the best of our kind. You will not lack for anything." Her heart was torn. The promises sounded tempting, but something in her gut told her to hesitate. Was this truly about creating something greater, or was she merely a pawn in a game too large for her to understand? "I need time to think," Ayana said, standing up, her voice firm despite the turmoil inside. "This is a lot to take in." Vornak stood as well, his imposing frame towering over her. "Of course, take the time you need, but remember, the offer will not be available forever. When you are ready, let me know." She nodded, though her mind was anything but at peace. As she turned to leave, the weight of the decision pressed heavily on her. Could she trust him? Was this really the right choice for her and the child she might carry? The door slid open, and she stepped into the hallway, the soft hum of the ship filling her ears once more. The weight of her thoughts only grew heavier as she walked away, uncertain of what the future held. But one thing was clear. This would change everything. The contract arrived on a sleek holographic tablet, its interface glowing with an otherworldly light. Ayana stared at it, her fingers hovering above the screen. The air in her small apartment felt stifling, heavy with the weight of the decision she was about to make. The hologram flickered, casting shadows across the dimly lit room as she pondered the next step in her life. Vornak's words echoed in her mind. This is a partnership, a mutual benefit. But could it really be? Could this alien, who seemed so disconnected from human emotion, truly offer something that would change her life? Or was it all a manipulation? Her eyes scanned the digital document, each word carefully crafted, promising wealth beyond her wildest dreams, security for her family, and a future for her child. Yet, amid the promises, the fine print was there, subtle, almost imperceptible, but undeniable. The child would be his, raised according to his specifications in a controlled environment far from human influence. There would be no say in the child's upbringing, no chance for Ayana to raise her own flesh and blood the way she saw fit. It was a contract, yes, but one built on a power imbalance that she couldn't ignore. "Is it worth it?" she whispered to herself, her fingers curling into fists, the tablet cold against her skin. She closed her eyes, her thoughts drifting back to her family. Her mother struggling with illness, and her younger brother who had dreams of attending university. Ayana had always carried the weight of her family's needs on her shoulders. This deal, this strange, otherworldly offer, could provide everything they ever dreamed of. But at what cost? Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of a message. It was from Kira. "You sure about this?" "It doesn't feel right. He doesn't even care about you." Ayana exhaled sharply, feeling the sting of Kira's words. Was she really just a tool in Vornak's eyes, a mere vessel for a child he would ultimately control? With a sigh, she opened the message, her thumb scrolling over the screen. "You can't trust him, Ayana. Please think this through." Whatever it is he's offering, there's a catch. Her best friend's words echoed the doubts that had been swirling in her mind ever since that first meeting. But Ayana knew the truth, too. She knew that life as it was had never given her the luxury of indecision. Every day had been about survival, about scraping by. And for once she had the chance to change everything, not just for herself, but for her family. The promise of wealth, of safety, was intoxicating. No more worrying about bills, no more struggling to make ends meet. But the price was steep. She stood up, pacing the small room. The walls seemed to close in on her, the weight of the decision growing heavier with every passing second. Could she really turn this down? Could she walk away from an opportunity like this, knowing how badly her family needed her? But then, a thought pierced through the haze of doubt. What kind of life would this child have? Ayana thought of the stories her grandmother had told her about their ancestors, about the strength and pride that ran through their veins. Her people had fought for their freedom, their dignity, their right to exist on their own terms. What would it mean for her child to be raised under Vornak's control, in a world where humans were nothing more than tools to be used? She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being asked to sacrifice her very soul. The room felt colder now, the contract burning in her hands. Her heart raced, and she placed the tablet down on the table, staring at the fine print. The alien's promises, his promises of a better future, what did they mean, really? What kind of future would it be for a child raised in an environment where nothing was truly their own? A knock at the door broke her thoughts. She froze, her heart skipping a beat. "Come in," she called out, her voice tight. The door slid open, and her mother stepped into the room. Her face was pale, eyes tired, but still filled with love. She had been through so much, her health deteriorating over the past year, but she still managed to smile. "You're still awake?" her mother asked softly, crossing the room to sit beside her. Ayana didn't answer at first, still staring at the contract. The weight of it felt suffocating. Is everything okay? Her mother asked, concern lacing her voice. Ayana exhaled slowly, looking up at her mother's tired face. She had always been the one to hold everything together, to shield her family from the worst. But now she wasn't sure if she could do it alone. I don't know, Mum, she said quietly. I don't know if I can do this. Her mother's gaze softened and she placed a hand over Ayana's. Whatever you choose, Ayana, we'll be here. But you have to trust yourself. This is your future, not anyone else's. Her mother's words resonated deep within her, but Ayana still wasn't sure. Was this the right choice? Was she really in control of her own future? The contract was still there, waiting. The first few weeks passed in a blur. Ayana tried to keep her normal routine, but the growing sensation of something new inside her, a life she wasn't yet sure she was ready for, began to change everything. Her body ached in places she didn't expect, a constant reminder that she was no longer just herself. Each morning, she woke up with a heaviness in her chest, a combination of anticipation and fear. She knew deep down that this would be the most important decision of her life. Vornak's presence loomed over her like a shadow, constant and unyielding. He never called or checked in, but his agents were always there, watching. Their eyes followed her every move, their quiet presence a reminder that she was not alone, not really. They monitored her health, her progress. Sometimes she would catch them standing in the distance, always watching from behind the shimmering glass walls of the sterile environment where she lived now. Despite her growing unease, Ayana couldn't ignore the small things that had started to change within her. The nausea, the exhaustion, the odd cravings she could barely explain. She tried to focus on the basics, taking care of herself, keeping a low profile, not drawing too much attention to her situation. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The sterile walls of her temporary living space felt more like a cage than a sanctuary. The space was large, modern and cold, with metal floors and sleek furniture. The stark brightness of the lighting never seemed to dim, even in the middle of the night. She couldn't remember the last time she had been able to sleep peacefully. Her interactions with Vornak had been minimal. He would visit her once a week, checking on her progress, asking about her health. But the conversations were always clinical, devoid of any warmth. He spoke with precision, his words measured, as if he were discussing a business transaction rather than a human being carrying his child. One evening, after he left, Ayana stood in front of the mirror, staring at the subtle changes in her reflection. Her skin had a new glow, but her eyes were tired. She looked different, not just physically, but emotionally too. She had always prided herself on her strength, her ability to keep her emotions in check. But now that strength felt like it was slipping away from her, piece by piece. She ran a hand over her abdomen, her thoughts drifting. "What am I doing?" she whispered to her reflection, the question hanging in the air. "Is this what's best for you? For us?" The child growing inside her wasn't just any child. It was the product of a deal, a contract she had signed without fully understanding the consequences. And yet, as she felt the tiny flutter of life stir within her, something deep inside her shifted. She wasn't just carrying a child for someone else's gain anymore. She was carrying her future. The weight of the situation pressed heavily on her. She didn't know how to reconcile the conflicting emotions that churned inside her. Part of her was scared, terrified of the unknown future this child might face, a future dictated by someone she barely knew. The other part of her was determined to make sure this child had a chance, even if that meant navigating a world where everything felt uncertain and out of control. In the quiet of her room, the silence was broken only by the hum of the air system. Ayana sat down on the bed, her hands resting on her stomach as she closed her eyes. She needed to find a way forward, a way to balance her obligations with her hopes. She had always been a fighter. She couldn't let this situation define her, no matter how much control Vornak had over her life. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She picked it up, hoping for a message from Kira, something to remind her that she wasn't alone in this. But the message wasn't from Kira. It was from Vornak. "Everything proceeding as planned," the message read. "Your health is of utmost importance. I will visit tomorrow to check on progress. Ayana's fingers tightened around the phone, the cold glow of the screen reflecting the hardening resolve in her chest. There it was again, the clinical, detached tone, the reminder that to him, this wasn't personal. It was just another experiment, another project. She put the phone down with a sigh, her thoughts swirling. She had a choice to make, and it wasn't one that she could take lightly. Would she continue down this path, entrusting her future and her child's future to someone who might never understand what it meant to truly love and protect a life? Or would she find a way to fight back, to reclaim control over her destiny? The future felt uncertain, but Ayana knew one thing for sure. She wasn't ready to give up just yet. She would find her strength again, no matter what it took. The day had arrived. Ayana could feel the weight of it in every fiber of her being. It had been a long, tense few months. Her body had changed in ways she never expected, and though she had tried to keep herself detached, there was no denying the reality now. The child inside her, the one she had once viewed as nothing more than an obligation, was now her responsibility. It was a life she was about to bring into the world, her world, not Vornak's. The sterile room she was in felt colder now, the air thick with anticipation. The walls, once an indifferent white, seemed to close in on her. The machines around her beeped and hummed, their cold efficiency stark against the warmth she had once felt in the chaos of her busy life before all this began. She had requested a natural birth, the only decision she had made for herself. Vornak had insisted on a more controlled clinical procedure, but Ayana stood firm. She needed this. She needed to feel in control of something, anything, in this bizarre arrangement. "Is everything ready?" she asked, her voice steady despite the panic slowly building within her. She had read about the complexities of hybrid births, how dangerous they could be for both mother and child, but she had not known how to prepare. A nurse, one of Vornak's employees, Ayana assumed, nodded without saying a word. The woman's face was neutral, expressionless, as if she were simply going through the motions. Ayana glanced at the nurse, but quickly turned away, trying to calm herself. There was something about the way they all moved, their detachment, that made her feel even more alone. She focused on the pain, the sharp contractions that were increasing in intensity. She had been through this before with her younger siblings. Birthing children was nothing new in her family. But this was different. The weight of the decision, the tension of knowing that Vornak was watching her progress from somewhere beyond the room, kept her mind spinning. Her mother had tried to call her earlier, but Ayana had let the call go to voicemail. She didn't want to talk about the pregnancy, didn't want to talk about the fear and the uncertainty. She wanted to do this on her own, even if she didn't have the faintest idea of what she was doing. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes, letting the pain wash over her. She would not let it break her. She could handle this. She was strong. She had always been strong. Her ancestors had fought battles far worse than this, and they had survived. The contraction hit harder this time, and Ayana squeezed her eyes shut, trying to breathe through it. She couldn't stop the tears that began to fall, though. She tried to wipe them away, but it was pointless. The emotions were too much, and she couldn't hide them any longer. As the pain ebbed for a moment, she felt the weight of the child inside her shift, a signal that the birth was imminent. Her body had never felt so foreign to her. The child, half alien, half human, was no longer something that could be kept at arm's length. The connection was real, the life growing inside her undeniable. The door to the room opened, and she knew it was him, Vornak. He entered quietly, as always, his tall, imposing figure casting a shadow across the sterile floor. He said nothing at first, just watched her from across the room, his dark eyes calculating as if assessing her every movement. "Are you ready?" His voice, though soft, carried an air of authority. Ayana didn't respond immediately, not trusting herself to speak without breaking down. She focused on the pain again, grounding herself in the present, in the moment she was living. She had chosen this. Chosen to carry this child despite the uncertainty, despite the fear. The future was unwritten, and she could not predict what would happen next. But what mattered was this moment, This child. It was hers. Yes, she finally answered, her voice steady even if her body was trembling. I'm ready. Vornak took a step closer, his expression unreadable. The tension in the room thickened as the final push of labor began. Ayana gritted her teeth, holding onto the edge of the bed as her body wrenched in agony. The pain was unlike anything she had ever experienced, but the child was coming. There was no turning back now. She could feel it, each movement, each shift of the child inside her. It was happening. And in this moment, she didn't care about the promises Vornak had made, or about the future he had planned. What mattered was the life that was about to emerge. With a final, forceful push, the room seemed to fall silent for a heartbeat. Ayana collapsed back into the bed, exhausted, her body trembling from the effort. But there, lying in front of her, was her child. The product of her strength, her choice. The child cried out, a loud, desperate sound echoing through the sterile room. Ayana's heart swelled with something she hadn't felt in months. It was relief, it was love, and it was the beginning of something she didn't fully understand, but knew would change everything. Vornak stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the child, his expression still unreadable. But Ayana didn't look at him. She looked at her baby, her child, and for the first time since this all began, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear. It was a new beginning. The child was perfect. Ayana had never seen anything more beautiful, even amidst the sterile, impersonal environment of the room. His cries echoed, full of life and strength, a stark contrast to the clinical silence that had surrounded her for months. The baby's skin was a rich, dark hue, much like her own, a color that carried the legacy of her ancestors. His small hands clenched and unclenched in the air, as though reaching out for something, for everything. But it was his eyes that caught Vornak's attention. His eyes, wide, deep, and glowing faintly in the dim light, were not what the Jatorian had expected. There was no trace of alien genetics in them, not in the way he had imagined. Instead of the glowing silver hue common in his species, the baby's eyes shimmered with an intense, natural human intensity. They weren't like anything Vornak had seen before. As the child's cries softened and Ayana held him close, Vornak stepped closer, his gaze fixed upon the infant. His expression was unreadable, but there was an undeniable tension in the air. The scientist in him, the alien ruler who had orchestrated this experiment, was suddenly at a loss. "What is this?" Vornak murmured, his voice a mix of disbelief and curiosity. The words were directed not to Ayana, but to the child, as if the baby could answer. Ayana, holding her son, looked up at him, her face still flushed with the exertion of childbirth. There was a tinge of exhaustion in her eyes, but also a spark of defiance. She had not expected this moment to feel so heavy, so foreign. This child, her son, was now a symbol of something greater than the experiment that had brought him into existence. "What's wrong with his eyes?" she asked quietly, her voice steady, but she could feel the underlying tension in her chest. She hadn't wanted to question anything, she hadn't even wanted to be here. But now, in the face of the reality of motherhood, everything felt like it was suddenly spiraling beyond her control. Vornak remained silent for a moment, stepping even closer, peering down at the infant's eyes. The glow was subtle, but it was there, an unmistakable radiance that suggested something more than mere genetics. It was almost as if the child had a presence of his own, something innate that couldn't be explained by science or logic. This... Vornak's voice trailed off, as if words couldn't capture the thoughts that filled his mind. He placed a gloved hand over his mouth, hiding his confusion, but the look in his eyes betrayed him. Ayana saw it, the flicker of something darker in his gaze. It wasn't anger exactly, but something far more unsettling. Fear, perhaps even awe. "You said he'd be like me," Ayana spoke softly, but there was an edge to her voice now. "You promised this child would be an extension of your race, but he's nothing like you." Vornak stepped back almost as though the words stung him, and for a brief moment Ayana saw something else in him. His towering presence seemed momentarily small, uncertain. It was the first crack in his seemingly perfect exterior. The baby stirred in Ayana's arms, his eyes blinking wide open once again, their glow intensifying. She could feel the warmth of him against her chest, the steady rise and fall of his breath, and she knew, deep down, that she could never allow him to become another tool in someone else's game. Vornak looked at the child again, his expression hardening. The scientific intrigue was still there, but it was now mixed with something else, something far more personal. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he muttered under his breath. Ayana felt the urge to protect her son rise like a tidal wave. She knew that whatever had happened, whatever this child was, she would fight to keep him safe. She had been chosen to carry him, but she wasn't about to let anyone control him, least of all Vornak. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Vornak's eyes flicked between Ayana and the baby, his thoughts clearly racing. For the first time, Ayana felt a sense of power she hadn't known she possessed. This wasn't just about the child anymore. This was about her own autonomy, and the future she would choose for herself and her son. She gently rocked the baby in her arms, his small face serene now, as if he already understood the weight of the world that rested on his shoulders. He was a symbol, a creature of two worlds, born from an alien's experiment, yet rooted in the strength of human resilience. "You're not taking him," Ayana said firmly, looking directly at Vornak. Her words were slow, measured, but they rang with authority. "He's mine, and I will raise him, not you." Vornak opened his mouth to speak, but then closed it again. He regarded her for a long moment, the flicker of curiosity in his eyes now mingled with a spark of something darker. "We'll see," he said quietly, before turning on his heel and walking out of the room, leaving Ayana alone with her son. Ayana watched him go, the tension slowly melting away as the door closed behind him. She turned her attention back to her child, holding him tighter against her chest. This was the beginning of something new. And no matter what the future held, Ayana knew one thing for sure: she would never let him go. Days passed, but Ayana's resolve remained as strong as ever. She cared for her son with a fierceness she hadn't known she was capable of. Each moment with him felt like a quiet rebellion, an act of defiance against the alien empire that had once tried to control her life. But even in the cocoon of her love for her child, the reality of the situation still lingered, heavy and unyielding. Vornak had not returned since the birth, and Ayana couldn't shake the feeling that the alien billionaire was not done with her, or her child, just yet. It was late one evening when the door to her quarters opened with a soft hiss. Ayana looked up, her heart leaping in her chest. It was him. Vornak stepped into the room, his tall frame cutting through the dim light, his dark eyes scanning her and the baby. The tension between them was palpable, thick and suffocating. "Your son is unlike anything I have ever encountered," Vornak said, his voice low and measured. He spoke as though he was still trying to understand what had happened, as though the words he was saying were just as foreign to him as the baby in her arms. Ayana held her ground, her eyes never leaving him. "I told you, he's mine. And I'll raise him the way I see fit." Vornak's expression remained unreadable, but there was something in his posture that shifted, a slight tension in his shoulders that suggested doubt. For a moment, the air between them hung heavy, a quiet standoff. The baby cooed in Ayana's arms, the innocent sound a stark contrast to the power struggle unfolding before them. "Do you think you understand this situation?" Vornak continued, taking a step closer. "But you don't. You don't understand the potential of your son, Ayana. He is far more than you realize, far more than I expected." Ayana's grip on her child tightened instinctively. "I know exactly what he is. He's my son. And that's all that matters." Vornak's gaze flickered down to the child, his eyes narrowing slightly. There was something almost regretful in his expression, as if he had made a miscalculation. His eyes. The words hung in the air between them. Ayana's heart skipped a beat. She knew that Vornak was referring to the child's eyes, the glow, the strange brilliance that had caught his attention the moment the baby was born. But Ayana had spent days looking into her son's eyes, and she could see nothing but purity and innocence. To her they were a symbol of his humanity, not some alien anomaly. "What about his eyes?" she asked, her voice steady, but the undercurrent of anger was impossible to ignore. "What's wrong with them?" Vornak took a deep breath, his gaze flickering between her and the child. "They are not just human," he said, his voice almost reverent. "They are something more, something beyond even my comprehension." Ayana frowned. "What do you mean by that?" Vornak hesitated before continuing, as if he was choosing his words carefully. "Your son is a fusion of two species, yes, but there is something in him that transcends biology, something that neither Jatorian nor human science could have predicted. His eyes, his abilities, they are not entirely of this world." Ayana's mind raced. She had known there was something special about her son, but the weight of Vornak's words sent a chill through her. What had she really brought into the world? Was her child just a pawn in an intergalactic experiment, or was there more to him than she understood? "I don't care what he is to you, Vornak," Ayana said firmly. "He's my child." "And you have no claim over him." Vornak's expression softened, but only slightly. The coldness in his eyes never fully disappeared. "I never intended to take him from you," he said quietly. "But I need you to understand that his potential is limitless. You cannot raise him in isolation, Ayana. He is destined for something greater than this." Ayana felt a knot form in her stomach. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to hear him talk about her son as if he were some kind of tool to be used. "I'll decide what's best for him," she said, her voice unwavering. "And you'll stay out of it." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken truths and buried fears. Then, with a resigned sigh, Vornak turned to leave, but not before one final glance at Ayana and her son. "I'm not done with this, Ayana," he said quietly, his voice carrying an edge she hadn't heard before. "Your son will not remain a secret forever." Ayana watched him walk out of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She was certain of one thing now. Vornak's doubts were not the only thing that had changed. The balance of power between them had shifted. The child she held was not just a link between two species, he was a symbol of something much more, and Ayana was prepared to protect him no matter the cost. Ayana sat by the window, gazing out at the sprawling city beyond. The lights of the station flickered like stars, distant and cold, just like the promises that had been made to her. The baby, now a few weeks old, slept soundly in her arms, his small body curled against her chest, oblivious to the storm that was brewing around them both. She had hoped that after the birth things might settle, that she could simply be a mother, take care of her child and maybe even find some semblance of peace. But peace had always been elusive for her. The world outside had never been kind, and it certainly wasn't kind now. Vornak's shadow hung over everything, and his words lingered in her mind like a weight she couldn't shake. "Your son is destined for something greater than this." She couldn't get them out of her head. What did he mean by that? What did he see when he looked at her son? Ayana could feel her grip tightening on the child in her arms, as if to hold on to the only thing she truly had, the only thing that was hers, truly hers. She had no intention of letting Vornak control her son, no matter what he thought was greater. Her mind was made up. She would raise him herself, in her own way, with the love and strength that had been passed down through generations. The way her grandmother had raised her mother and the way her mother had raised her. There was power in that lineage, power that Vornak would never understand. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the door. She stiffened instinctively, knowing who it was before the voice even called out. "Ayana, we need to talk." It was Vornak's voice, unmistakable and calm, but there was something in it now, something different, a subtle edge as though he were testing her. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't stand up. She simply remained there, her gaze still on the window as if hoping he might leave. But of course he didn't. The door slid open, and Vornak entered, his dark presence filling the room. His eyes, always calculating, scanned her and the baby, lingering on the child's glowing eyes for just a moment before flicking back to her. "I've been thinking about our arrangement," Vornak began, his voice smooth, almost too calm. "You've made it clear that you intend to raise him on your own, but I'm afraid you don't understand what you're dealing with, Ayana." Her jaw tightened at the implication in his words. She wasn't sure if it was his tone or the content, but something about it made her blood run cold. "I understand enough," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I understand that this is my child, and I'll raise him, not you." Vornak's eyes flashed with something she couldn't quite place. It wasn't anger, but something colder. A challenge, perhaps. "You think you can protect him from what he is?" he asked, almost mocking her. "You think you can shield him from the truth?" Ayana stood then, her back straight, the baby still cradled gently in her arms. She didn't know how to explain it, but she could feel the distance between them widening. This wasn't just about a mother protecting her child anymore. This was something else, a war of wills, of power. "I don't need to shield him," Ayana said, her voice firm. "I just need to love him. That's what matters. And he'll grow strong because of that, not because of your grand designs." Vornak's expression darkened, but he didn't move. "You're naive," he said, his voice low. "You have no idea what he's capable of, what he can do. His potential is—" "I am his potential," Ayana interrupted, her voice rising for the first time. "I am all he needs." "You've underestimated him, Vornak, and you've underestimated me." The room seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, the tension between them was almost palpable, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of their words. Vornak stood still, but she could see the conflict in his eyes. He was trying to maintain control, but something was shifting. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She couldn't afford to be. "You're not the one who decides what he becomes," Vornak said, his tone quieter now, but still laced with authority. "He's mine, Ayana, and he will belong to me, whether you accept it or not." Ayana's heart beat faster, but she held her ground. "No," she said firmly. "He's mine, and you will not control him. I won't let you." For a long moment, Vornak didn't respond. He just stood there watching her. But in his silence, she could feel the weight of his gaze, as though he were calculating something, trying to figure out how to move forward. Finally, with a quiet sigh, he turned and walked toward the door, but not before glancing back at her one last time. "We shall see, Ayana. We shall see what he becomes." And with that he was gone, leaving her alone once again. Ayana stood in the stillness of the room, her heart pounding. She knew the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun, but she would fight it every step of the way, for her son, for herself, and for the future she would carve out. No one would take that from her. No one. The days blurred into each other, the weight of constant uncertainty hanging over Ayana like a storm cloud. The quiet of her quarters was always interrupted by the hum of the facility, an omnipresent reminder of her isolation. Vornak's last words echoed in her mind, not as a threat but as a declaration. "We shall see what he becomes." Ayana clenched her fists. She had no intention of letting him dictate her son's future. Her resolve only grew stronger with every passing day. The baby, her baby, was hers to raise, and she would do it on her terms. But the tension in the air was palpable. She could feel it in the way the staff looked at her, in the way Vornak's agents lingered outside her door. They were watching her, waiting. Ayana had never been one to cower from pressure, but now, with her child in her arms, everything felt amplified. The stakes were higher. The baby was growing quickly, as if he were racing towards something unknown, something that she couldn't quite understand. His eyes, those glowing eyes, reminded her of the weight of their reality. He was not just a child. He was a symbol of something bigger. Ayana's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She stood up, her heart skipping a beat, the baby stirring in her arms. When she opened it, it was not Vornak who stood there, but one of his agents, a tall, silent figure who offered her a datapad. "Message from the master," the agent said, his voice monotone. Ayana took the pad, her fingers brushing against the cold surface. She didn't need to read it to know what it was. Vornak wasn't finished with her yet. The message was short, as always, direct. "You will bring the child to the central meeting room tomorrow. There are matters to discuss." She exhaled sharply, her mind racing. She had been expecting this moment, but the reality of it still made her stomach churn. They were not done. Not by a long shot. Her eyes lingered on the message for a moment longer before she dismissed it. She was not afraid. She had made her choice long ago, and this was part of the price she would have to pay. The next morning, She dressed carefully, her movements deliberate. The baby, now peacefully sleeping in her arms, was her anchor, her reason for standing tall. She would not let them break her, no matter what they tried to do. As she entered the central meeting room, her eyes quickly scanned the space. It was cold, clinical, designed for efficiency, not comfort. The walls were made of sleek metal, and there were no windows, just a dull, artificial light that illuminated the space with a sterile glow. Vornak stood at the far end of the room, his figure imposing as always. His dark eyes flicked toward her, assessing her every move. But for the first time since this began, there was something different in his gaze. It was a mix of curiosity and something else, something that made Ayana's pulse quicken. "Come in, Ayana," Vornak said, his voice smooth but laced with an undertone of something she couldn't quite place. "You've made a bold decision." She walked forward, her steps purposeful, every inch of her defiant. "I'm here. What do you want?" Vornak's lips quirked, but there was no warmth in the expression. "I want what's best for your son," he said, his tone measured. "I want him to be more than just another human. He is a bridge between two worlds. His power, his potential, is limitless." Ayana's grip tightened on the baby, her protective instincts flaring. "He's not a tool, Vornak. He's my child, and you will not control him." The silence that followed hung heavy in the air. Vornak did not react, but there was a shift in the room, a tension that Ayana could almost feel. She knew this was more than just a conversation. It was a test. "Do you really think you can raise him alone?" Vornak asked, stepping forward, his eyes never leaving her. "He will need guidance, Ayana. He will need power, and the world will not wait for him to grow into it. He will be a leader, a force to be reckoned with. You cannot protect him from what he is destined to become." Ayana's heart beat faster, but her voice remained steady. "You don't know him. You don't understand what he is. And you certainly don't understand me." The room seemed to grow colder, the walls pressing in as Vornak took another step closer. "I will give you the chance to come to your senses," he said, his voice low, a challenge hanging in the air. "But know this, Ayana. You cannot hold back what is already inside him. I will be patient. But this is bigger than both of us." Ayana's mind raced, but she stood her ground. She had no intention of backing down. This was her fight, and she would not let anyone, not even Vornak, dictate her son's fate. "I'm done talking," Ayana said coldly, turning to leave the room. Vornak didn't stop her. As she walked away, she could feel his eyes on her, but she didn't look back. This was her choice, her path, and no matter what Vornak believed, she would protect her son, no matter the cost. The days continued to stretch on, each one marked by a mixture of quiet routine and simmering tension. Ayana found herself becoming more protective of her son with every passing moment. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but she welcomed it, knowing that her child was growing, changing, and becoming something far greater than anyone could predict. There were moments, though, when Ayana felt the stirrings of unease. The baby was growing at an astonishing rate, his development far ahead of what she had expected. His movements were stronger now, more deliberate, and sometimes, when he looked up at her, those glowing eyes seemed to hold a depth of understanding that shouldn't have been there for such a young child. She had always believed that love and nurture could shape a child, but the baby, her son, was different. One evening, as the baby lay in her arms, Ayana noticed something peculiar. His tiny hand reached up, his fingers tracing the air as if he were feeling something invisible. She couldn't explain it, but she felt an energy in the room, something electric that hummed beneath her skin. The baby's eyes, glowing softly in the dim light, seemed to reflect the intensity of that energy. She flinched when he suddenly cooed, a sound that felt too mature for someone so young. The sound was different now, richer, almost as if it were layered with something other than the innocence of infancy. Ayana looked down at him, her heart racing with an instinctive unease. This was her child, but he wasn't just a child. She could sense it. In a heartbeat, he stopped cooing and reached up again, his small hand brushing against her cheek. The touch was soft, but it left a lingering warmth, a strange pull that made Ayana's breath hitch. She could feel the presence of something ancient, something beyond her comprehension, awakening within him. A shiver ran down her spine. She had never seen a child with this kind of presence, this kind of power. Before she could say anything, there was a soft knock at the door. She didn't need to guess who it was. The familiar presence of Vornak lingered just beyond the doorframe. The faintest crack of tension pulsed through her veins. He was watching, waiting, just like always. "Come in," she called, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her. Vornak entered, his tall figure silhouetted against the hallway's dim light. His dark eyes locked onto her immediately, and then they shifted down to the baby. The baby's eyes glowed brighter for a moment as though responding to Vornak's presence. Ayana saw the flicker of something in his expression, something close to fascination, but also wariness. "His abilities are awakening," Vornak said, his voice soft, but filled with an unmistakable tension. "It's faster than I anticipated." Ayana's heart sank. She had felt it too, but hearing it from him, hearing him confirm it, made the reality of it feel more real. "I don't care what you think he is," Ayana replied, her voice firm. "He's my son and he will be raised by me. He's not a weapon for you to control." Vornak didn't flinch at her words, but the air between them thickened. "I never said he was a weapon," he replied, his gaze never leaving the child. "But he's more than a mere human, Ayana. The potential inside him is beyond anything we've ever known. He's already starting to tap into it, and we're only at the beginning." Ayana tightened her hold on her son, a deep, protective instinct rising in her. "I'm not going to let you manipulate him, Vornak," she said, her voice low but intense. "He's not yours to control." Vornak's eyes flickered, and for a moment Ayana saw something else there, something unexpected. It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it was something far deeper. A glimmer of respect, perhaps, or was it fear? "I don't want to control him, Ayana," he said quietly. "I want to understand him. Understand what he can become. What he will become." The baby stirred in Ayana's arms, his tiny fingers twitching. He looked up at Vornak then, his gaze intense, the glow in his eyes, flickering like a silent challenge. Ayana watched Vornak's reaction closely. For a moment, his mask slipped, his eyes widening ever so slightly in surprise, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, the expression was gone. He took a step back, his posture shifting as though he were recalibrating. "He's not like us," Vornak said, his voice thick with the weight of his realization. "But he could be more." Ayana's heart pounded in her chest. What did that mean? More than human, more than alien? What kind of future were they talking about for her child? The silence in the room hung between them like a fragile thread, ready to snap at any moment. She felt the pressure of it all, Vornak's expectations, the baby's growing abilities, and the terrifying unknown of what the future might hold. "I won't let you turn him into something he's not," Ayana said firmly, her voice unwavering. Vornak looked at her for a long time, his gaze unreadable. "We'll see, Ayana," he said softly, almost as if to himself. "We'll see what he becomes." And with that he turned and left the room, leaving Ayana standing there, her son still in her arms, a sense of dread settling over her. What had she just stepped into? And what was her son truly becoming? Ayana couldn't shake the feeling that something was building beneath the surface, something far greater than the control she thought she had. After Vornak's departure, the room felt colder, as if his words had left a lingering chill. The baby, still in her arms, seemed to sense it too, his little fingers grasping at her chest as if seeking comfort from the storm she could feel gathering. She rocked him slowly, trying to calm her own racing thoughts. In the days that followed, Ayana noticed the shift in the air. There was a subtle change in the way people looked at her. She couldn't pinpoint it at first, an unease that wasn't there before. The staff, once neutral, now seemed more distant. The whispers behind closed doors were harder to ignore, the conversations too quiet when she entered a room. Even Vornak's agents, who had been little more than silent observers before, now seemed to hover just a little too close. Her mind raced, but she kept her focus on her son. The baby's development was accelerating more rapidly than any normal human child's. He was learning faster, growing stronger, and yet Ayana couldn't help but feel an undercurrent of fear creeping into her heart. Was this natural? Was this what Vornak had meant when he said her son was more? More than just human, more than just a hybrid. What did that mean for her, for him, for their future? She couldn't afford to dwell on the what-ifs. Not now. Not when she had her child to protect. It was late one evening when the quiet that had settled over her quarters was broken. The door slid open, and this time it wasn't an agent or even Vornak. It was Kira, her best friend, the one person who had always stood by her side. Kira's eyes were filled with concern as she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I've been hearing things," Kira said, her voice low and cautious as if afraid of being overheard. "People are talking about him, Ayana. About your son." Ayana's heart clenched. "What are they saying?" Kira hesitated for a moment before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "They say he's not normal. That he's dangerous." Ayana felt a surge of panic, but she forced it down, her grip tightening around her son, who had begun to stir in her arms. "Of course he's not normal. He's not just a human. He's mine. That's all that matters." Kira didn't respond immediately. She crossed the room and stood beside Ayana, her gaze shifting to the baby. The faint glow in his eyes caught her attention, and Ayana saw the hesitation in her friend's face. "Ayana, you know I'm with you, but what if he's becoming something we don't understand? What if Vornak is right? What if there's more to this than we can handle?" Ayana shook her head, her jaw clenched. "I don't care what Vornak thinks. I won't let him control us, not now, not ever." Kira met her eyes, her expression torn between concern and loyalty. "I know you won't, but you have to be careful. There's too much at stake. You've got a child who's already showing signs of something extraordinary, and you're surrounded by people who want to use him, Ayana. You have to think about his future, about what he might become." The word stung more than Ayana was ready to admit. She didn't want to think about it, didn't want to face the possibility that her son might not be the child she had imagined, the child she had hoped for. But as the baby shifted in her arms, his eyes glowing with that strange otherworldly light, Ayana couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Kira was right. There was something more here, something she didn't fully understand, and that terrified her. "I'll protect him, Kira," Ayana said, her voice soft but determined. "No matter what happens, he's my son, and I'll make sure no one takes him from me." Kira nodded slowly, her expression softening. "I know you will, but you don't have to do this alone, Ayana. You've got me. You've got us. Don't forget that." Ayana felt a lump form in her throat. She wanted to believe it, wanted to believe that her son, her little boy, was the key to a future that wasn't defined by others. But the weight of Vornak's words, the way he spoke about the child as if he were a weapon, hung heavy on her heart. And she couldn't shake the fear that whatever this child was becoming, it was something that even she couldn't control. The door to the room slid open again, this time without warning. Vornak stood there, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the floor. His eyes immediately locked onto the baby, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. "I see he's growing," Vornak said, his voice neutral. "Faster than expected." Ayana stood up, instinctively moving to shield her son. "What do you want, Vornak?" Vornak took a slow step forward, his gaze never leaving the child. "I've been patient, Ayana, but you and I both know that he's not just any child, he's the future. And I've come to ensure that future." Ayana's heart pounded, but she refused to let him see her fear. "I won't let you control him. Not now. Not ever." Vornak's expression hardened, his eyes darkening. "You misunderstand, Ayana. I'm not here to control him. I'm here to guide him, and you," he paused, his voice lowering, "will be a part of that. Whether you like it or not." The tension in the room thickened, and Ayana could feel the suffocating weight of the decision she had to make. Her son's future was no longer just a matter of love and protection. It was a matter of power, and she wasn't sure if she could fight what was coming next. "We'll see," she whispered under her breath, her resolve steeling. The war for her son's future had just begun. Ayana stood in the dimly lit room, her son's steady breathing the only sound that filled the silence. The weight of Vornak's words lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. She had known this moment would come, the moment when everything would change, but even knowing it, she wasn't prepared for how real it felt. The tension had been building for so long, and now, with Vornak's ominous declaration hanging over her, Ayana felt like she was on the edge of something much larger than herself. Her son stirred in her arms, his small face soft and innocent, the glow in his eyes barely visible in the low light. Despite the overwhelming pressure closing in on her, she focused on the warmth of him, the way he trusted her completely, as if he knew she would always protect him. She had promised herself that she would never let anyone take him from her, but with each passing day that promise felt harder to keep. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. This time there was no hesitation in her movement. She walked to the door, her heart racing, and opened it. Standing there as expected was Vornak, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the threshold. His expression was unreadable, his usual calm demeanor masking whatever emotions might have been simmering beneath the surface. "I've given you enough time to think, Ayana," Vornak said, his voice smooth but edged with something colder than usual. "Now it's time to face reality. You can't protect him forever." Ayana felt a flare of anger rise within her, but she pushed it down, focusing instead on the baby in her arms. "He's my son. And I won't let you use him as a tool for your plans." Vornak's gaze flickered to the baby, his eyes lingering on the child for a moment longer than Ayana was comfortable with. "He's not just a child. You know that as well as I do. His potential is limitless, and I intend to help him unlock it. You cannot stand in the way of that." Ayana's grip tightened on her son, her fingers trembling slightly, but her voice remained firm. "You're wrong. He's not yours to control. I won't let you twist him into whatever you think he should be." For the first time, Vornak seemed to consider her words more deeply. There was a brief moment of silence between them, a quiet standoff, and Ayana could feel the weight of his gaze on her. She had always been able to sense when someone was studying her, but this felt different. Vornak wasn't just watching her. He was measuring her, trying to determine just how far she would go to protect her son. "Ayana, you have no idea what you're up against," Vornak said quietly, his voice softer now but still laced with an undercurrent of power. "I am offering you a choice, a chance for him to become something more, something greater. But if you continue to refuse, there will be consequences." Ayana's heart skipped a beat. The threat was clear, but she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She had already decided that no matter what Vornak did, she would protect her son at all costs. "I don't need your offer," Ayana replied, her voice unwavering. "I don't need you. I only need him." Vornak's eyes narrowed slightly, the faintest trace of frustration flickering across his features. "You're making a mistake, Ayana. A mistake that could cost both of you dearly." Her breath caught in her throat, but she held his gaze. "You don't scare me, Vornak, and I won't let you turn my son into something you can control. He's more than you'll ever understand." Vornak stepped back, his eyes still locked on her as if weighing her resolve. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity, each second pressing down on her, reminding her of everything she stood to lose. But despite the fear gnawing at her insides, Ayana knew that she couldn't back down. "I've made my choice," she said firmly, her voice steady even as her heart raced. "I'll protect him. Whatever it takes." Vornak remained silent for a long moment, his gaze flickering between Ayana and her son. Then, with a slow nod, he turned on his heel and walked toward the door. "You'll regret this, Ayana," he said over his shoulder, his voice tinged with a quiet threat. "But I will give you time to see what your son becomes. Time to see if you can truly protect him from what's coming." With that, Vornak was gone, leaving Ayana alone in the silence once more. She closed the door, her body still tense with the adrenaline that surged through her. Her son shifted in her arms, as though sensing her unease. She held him tighter, feeling the weight of the decision she had made. Vornak's words rang in her ears, but she knew one thing for certain. No matter what came next, she would stand by her son. No one would take him from her. Not now. Not ever. The battle had only just begun, and Ayana was ready to fight for her son, no matter the cost. The days after Vornak's visit were marked by an oppressive stillness. The weight of his words, the threat of what he might do next, hung heavy over Ayana. She had expected conflict, but the subtlety of his manipulation left her feeling like she was standing on a precipice, unsure of which way to turn. She spent her days with her son, keeping him close, away from the prying eyes that seemed to follow her wherever she went. The baby had grown, his abilities continuing to develop at an alarming rate. His intelligence was sharper than most children his age, and his strength, though still that of a toddler, was nothing short of extraordinary. Ayana couldn't help but wonder if he was already beginning to unlock some of the potential Vornak had spoken of. Her thoughts were interrupted one evening by a sharp knock on her door. She stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing as she instinctively moved closer to the baby. A part of her had known this moment would come. Vornak had made it clear that his patience was running out. With a deep breath, Ayana opened the door. Standing before her was an unfamiliar face, one of Vornak's higher-ranking agents, this one more imposing than the others, his expression unreadable. "Are you Ayana?" he asked, his voice cold and clipped. "Yes," she replied, standing her ground, her arms still holding her son. "I've been sent to inform you that you will comply with Vornak's request," the agent said, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "You will bring the child to the central facility immediately. There will be no more delays." Ayana's pulse quickened. The agent's words were clear. Vornak's demand was not a suggestion, it was an order. She could feel the pressure building, the walls closing in. She had expected this, but now that it was here, the reality of it was different. "No," she said, her voice steady despite the dread that coursed through her veins. "I won't do that." The agent didn't flinch, but his gaze hardened. "This is your last warning, Ayana. You have no choice. He is not just a child. He is part of something much larger, and if you continue to refuse, there will be consequences." The threat was clear, but Ayana wasn't backing down. Not this time. She had made her decision. "I will protect him," she said, the words sharp and firm. "You and Vornak will not have him." For a moment, there was a tense silence. The agent's eyes scanned her, assessing, calculating. Then, with a single nod, he turned and walked away without saying another word. Ayana stood frozen in the doorway, her body tense, every instinct screaming at her to prepare for what was coming next. As the door clicked shut, Ayana felt the weight of the threat settle deep in her chest. She knew Vornak would not let this go. If anything, the agent's visit had confirmed that the situation was far from over. The battle for her son's future wasn't just about Vornak's demands. It was about something much darker that she had yet to fully understand. She glanced down at the baby, whose glowing eyes locked onto hers. There was something in his gaze, something almost knowing, that sent a shiver down her spine. She had always believed that love could protect him, but now she wasn't so sure. The stakes had changed, and she knew the coming days would test everything she had ever believed in. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft chime of a message arriving on her datapad. She picked it up cautiously, expecting another warning from Vornak, another demand. But this time, the message was different. It was brief, the words chilling in their simplicity. "Your resistance will only make things worse for you. Prepare for what's to come. The child is not safe unless you comply." Ayana's hands trembled as she set the datapad down. She could feel the danger growing, the storm on the horizon. Vornak was right about one thing: this wasn't just about a child. This was about power, and it was a power that even she, with all her strength and determination, wasn't sure she could control. The future of her son, and perhaps even her own future, hung in the balance. There was no turning back now. Ayana knew that no matter what, she couldn't let Vornak take her son. But as she looked down at the baby, she couldn't ignore the feeling that whatever was coming, it would change everything. The clock was ticking, and soon Ayana would have to make a choice that would determine not only her son's fate, but the fate of the world around them. The consequences were closing in, and Ayana had no idea just how far Vornak was willing to go to get what he wanted. Ayana couldn't ignore the tension in the air any longer. Every moment felt charged, as though something was about to give, something that could change everything. The message from Vornak's agent had been a clear warning, but it had also opened a floodgate of thoughts, fears, and what-ifs that she couldn't shake. The baby, her son, was growing in ways that were both miraculous and terrifying. His abilities were becoming more pronounced with each passing day, but they also made Ayana question what kind of future awaited him. The walls of her quarters felt too small, closing in on her as she paced back and forth. The baby was sleeping now, tucked safely in the crib she had insisted on keeping, even though Vornak had tried to convince her that the child needed a special, more secure space for his development. She had resisted, unwilling to let go of her sense of control, even as the world around her threatened to unravel. Her thoughts were interrupted by the low hum of her datapad vibrating on the table. She didn't have to look to know it was another message from Vornak. The last one had been clear. His patience was running out. But this time, when she picked it up, it wasn't from him. It was from an unknown source. She stared at the screen for a moment, her heart beating faster as she opened it. "If you want your son to have any chance at freedom, meet me at the old warehouse on Sector 9, alone. Time is running out." The words sent a jolt through her body. She didn't recognize the sender, but the message was urgent, and it was the first sign of someone reaching out to her in a way that didn't involve threats or manipulation. It could be a trap, but Ayana couldn't ignore it. She had been backed into a corner for too long. The idea of someone, anyone who might offer her a way out, made her feel a flicker of hope. She hesitated for only a moment before making up her mind. She would go. She had no choice but to take this chance. The baby's future, her future, depended on the decisions she made now. And if she didn't act quickly, Vornak would take everything from her. As she prepared to leave, she felt a pang of guilt. Leaving her son, even if it was only for a short time, didn't sit right with her. She didn't know what she would find when she returned. But she also knew that if she didn't make this move, the alternatives were far worse. Vornak wouldn't stop until he had what he wanted. She had to find a way to turn the tide before it was too late. The cold night air hit her like a slap as she stepped outside, her footsteps echoing in the deserted streets of the facility. The warehouse was located on the outskirts, a place she had only heard about in rumors. The area was abandoned, dilapidated, but something about it felt oddly familiar. She wasn't sure if that was a good sign or a bad one. Every step felt heavier than the last, and the silence of the night seemed to stretch forever. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that Vornak's agents were following her. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the mission ahead. This was her only shot at gaining some control over the situation. She couldn't afford to be distracted by paranoia. When she finally reached the warehouse, it looked even more foreboding than she had imagined. The building was old, its windows boarded up, the walls covered in layers of grime and rust. It was the kind of place that felt like it held too many secrets. Ayana's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she steeled herself and pushed the door open, stepping inside. The air was thick with dust, the musty scent of neglect hanging in the air. There was a dim light coming from the back, casting long shadows across the floor. She moved carefully, her senses on high alert, every nerve in her body telling her to be cautious. And then she saw him. A man stood at the far end of the warehouse, his back to her. His silhouette was familiar, but his features were hidden in the shadows. He didn't move as she approached, but there was a stillness to him that gave Ayana pause. She wasn't sure if it was the man's demeanor or the situation itself, but her heart started pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" Ayana asked, her voice steady, but the tension in her words was undeniable. The man turned slowly, revealing his face. It wasn't someone she recognized, but the intensity in his eyes made her freeze. "I'm someone who wants to help you," he said, his voice calm, but there was an urgency in his tone. "But we don't have much time." Ayana's mind raced. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but something told her that this man might be her only ally in the battle to save her son. And in that moment, she realized that her fight was far from over. It had only just begun. The man stood before Ayana, his eyes filled with a quiet intensity that was both unsettling and strangely reassuring. She had expected answers, expected clarity, but now that she was face to face with him, the weight of her choices seemed heavier. The flickering light in the warehouse cast shadows across his face, but Ayanna could still make out the sharpness of his features, the determination in his stance. He wasn't just anyone, and that much was obvious. "You said you want to help," Ayanna said, her voice steady but tinged with doubt. "Who are you, and why should I trust you?" The man's gaze softened slightly, but the urgency in his voice didn't fade. "I'm someone who has been watching you, Ayanna, watching your son. I know what Vornak wants. And I know that you're not ready for what's coming." He paused, stepping closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm here because there's a way out, for both of you." Ayanna felt a spark of hope, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of her skepticism. "What do you mean, a way out?" she asked, her heart pounding as she tried to read his intentions. "What does that even mean?" The man exhaled slowly, clearly weighing his words. "Vornak's plan is far more dangerous than you realize. He's not just interested in controlling your son. He wants to harness what he's capable of, to use it for his own gain. And you," he said, pausing to meet her gaze, "you're standing in the way." Ayanna's chest tightened. She had known Vornak wanted control, but hearing it so plainly made it feel even more real. "I won't let him do that," she replied, her voice cold with resolve. "I won't let him turn my son into a weapon." The man nodded, his expression grim. "I understand, but you're not the only one who wants to stop him. There are others, people who have been trying to bring down Vornak for years. They know what he's planning, and they're willing to help you, but you have to make a choice, Ayanna. You can't keep protecting him on your own. Not anymore." Ayanna took a step back, her mind racing. It was tempting to believe him, to think that there was a way to escape Vornak's influence. But something about this felt too easy, too convenient. She couldn't trust him completely. Not yet. "Why should I believe you?" she asked, the skepticism clear in her voice. "How do I know you're not just another part of Vornak's game?" The man's eyes flashed with something like impatience, but he quickly masked it. "Because I'm offering you a choice. Vornak isn't. He'll take your son from you if you let him. But I'm here to show you that there's a way to protect him, to give him the future he deserves. You just have to trust me." Ayanna hesitated, her thoughts swirling. She couldn't afford to be naive. Vornak had shown her just how far he was willing to go to get what he wanted. She couldn't risk putting her son in the hands of anyone who might have an agenda, even if that person claimed to be on her side. But as she looked down at her child, still sleeping soundly in her arms, something shifted inside her. She couldn't protect him from everything on her own. She had to take a risk. She had to find a way to stop Vornak before it was too late. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice firm, resolute. The man's eyes softened, but there was no mistaking the seriousness in his voice when he spoke. "You need to trust the people who have been fighting this fight from the beginning. They can help you, but first you need to leave this facility, leave everything behind. You won't be safe here much longer." Ayanna felt a surge of panic at the thought of leaving everything she knew behind, but at the same time, the weight of the decision she had made, the danger that loomed over her son's future, settled into her chest like a heavy stone. "I can't leave without him," she said, her voice tight with emotion. The man nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Of course. But you won't be able to protect him here. You have to go. You have to act now." A part of her wanted to refuse, to stay and fight on her own terms. But the look in his eyes told her this was no time for hesitation. The time to act had arrived, and it was now or never. "All right," Ayanna said, the words feeling heavy but necessary. "Let's do this." As she turned to leave the warehouse, the man following closely behind, she felt the weight of the choice settle over her once more. There was no turning back. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was the only chance she had left. And for her son, she would face whatever came next. The battle for her family's future was far from over. But now, for the first time, Ayanna felt like she had a chance to win,